I often sit with my R1 brainstorming video ideas. We both take credit for being the brains of the operation, but I will admit she has the looks. But some of the ideas that I love to create simply don't need to be stretched out to the 10-minute mark. So today we're going to try 3 bike videos in one. Now that's bang for your buck. I'm sure you're pretty used to seeing montages like this. It goes like this: climb on, turn the key, dramatically hit the mode button, watch it slide from standard to A mode on the dash, start up to appreciate the exhaust note, and finally ride off into the sunset, just without the sunset. It's one of the most satisfying things to watch in my opinion, but it's probably the worst habit I could have formed. Because you see, A mode sucks. It turns this beautiful and pure connection to the heart of your bike into a device that controls a mechanical bull. It's a part of the big ego conundrum, I think, that leads us to hop on just about any motorcycle and immediately put it into the sportiest mode on offer. And often we're not even aware of what each mode does. But A mode does sound a lot more impressive than B, and a lot less dangerous than whatever you can catch from STD mode. In fact, A mode doesn't give you more power to play with at all. It just alters the throttle response, making it feel more powerful because it's more responsive low down in the revs. But as a result, it's insanely twitchy, and the slightest of throttle movements can upset the whole bike. It makes slow maneuvers far more tricky. It puts me off of making handlebar inputs on the off chance that I slightly twist the throttle. And gear changes can be quirkier when getting back on the overexcited power. It is a famous Yamaha issue, and a simple ECU reflash can fix the fueling, which is probably aggravated by these exhausts. But I prefer to just whinge about it and convince myself that I'm a terrible rider. Except that when you put the ego away for a second and skip the fighter pilot routine of flicking it into A mode, standard mode makes it feel like a brand new motorcycle. Sure, it's not as satisfying when you hop on because there's no mode to play with. It's not as satisfying to look down and see standard mode. But the power delivery is crisper and more exhilarating. And the bike feels lighter to turn because you're not scared to bump the throttle through handlebar inputs. Gearing on a sport bike is something rather special. Not many vehicles can get to 140 kilometers an hour before needing to change into second. But the problem is the highest speed limit around here is only 120 kilometers an hour, and that's on a highway. So that got me thinking. Quite frankly, you could own a superbike and ride it everywhere you need to go without ever changing out of first gear, if you plan to abide by speed limits, that is. So I decided to try exactly that. And I immediately found a few problems with this technique. You probably think that the constant high revving would be annoying, but it never actually has to rev that high to be doing the speed limit. And it's rather comforting to hear the whole rev range of my gorgeous sounding crossplane crank for a change. But life without rev matching wasn't a life worth living. And the higher than normal revs at slow speeds meant it was running quite hot. And the biggest problem was that I was limited to 140, which is quite a hindrance on an R1. Although being in first gear all the time did have its acceleration advantages. But eventually I made it my lengthy 2.5 kilometers and got my well-deserved Red Bull. Apparently, just because you can ride everywhere in first gear doesn't mean you should. But nevertheless, it is a cool party trick. The toolkits that come with bikes are always really strange. They supposedly have all the right tools in them, but in the most bizarre configuration that makes you never want to actually use them. Mine usually spends its life round about here, in a drawer. It's marginal gains, weight shedding for the day I need the edge over an identical bike, but mostly just to aggravate the toolkit advocates in the YouTube comments. However, I've often wondered how far you could get if all you had was a bike and its toolkit at home. No garage full of real tools to suit every occasion. And the answer actually surprised me. I have to admit, this is not my bike's toolkit. This is from another Yamaha. However, I have sourced all the tools that I believe does come in a standard toolkit to see how far we can get with them. These are probably far more ergonomic, but that's just a silly excuse. We've got a 32mm socket, 3 Allen keys, pliers, a Phillips screwdriver, a flathead screwdriver, 4 spanners ranging from 8 to 14mm, and a spark plug tool. Back wheel? Check. Front wheel? No. Fiddly, but check. Surprisingly enough, check. Seems to work. Check. Although now all my settings are wrong. Check. And the only aspect the bike actually needed. Quite frankly, no. Although you might have the right tools once you get to the right place, you don't necessarily have the right extensions to get there in the first place. So as long as you don't need a new front tire, an engine rebuild, or a fork seal replacement, and actually there's probably quite a long list, you should be fine. To be honest, I was pretty sure I'd struggle to simply adjust my mirrors with the basic toolkit. But maybe it's not so useless after all.